Good afternoon, everyone. I welcome you all to our session on connecting the dots, unlocking mobility, shared digital infrastructure. We're very glad to be doing this session in collaboration with India Fragmented Collaborative. Over the past 2 years, we've been looking at how shared digital infrastructure can make public mobility stronger. In 2023, first we tested how common data standards could help planning, operations, and monitoring work together. Then last year in 2024 at Connect Karo, in line with India's G20 leadership, we introduced the idea of a DPI or digital public infrastructure thinking as a foundation for scaling and innovation in e-bus ecosystem. This year we are taking the next step. The question we want to explore is how do we move from this fragmented pilots in mobility to connected mobility that works across different modes, different cities, different operators, and different platforms. The core idea here is from our learning that we see that mobility at the moment is very fragmented. So fragmentation is the condition in this sector. Lack of shared digital infrastructure is the constraint, and poor public outcomes are the consequences. So when every city or every operator or every agency builds their own system, public value is limited by what they alone can offer to create. And so shared digital infrastructure gives us a way to coordinate, plug in and grow together. It creates the foundation to serve more people more reliably. And we also see some clear trends shaping this conversation. Passengers increasingly expect digital options like pre-booking, online payments and transparent service guarantees. Full stack tech aggregators in mobility play a role, but closed systems don't scale for everyone. And as credit subsidies and coordination become more data-driven, operators and ways to make their service visible, verifiable, and mission-readable. So that's the background for today's discussion, and here's how we've structured the session. We will begin with the context-setting presentation by my colleague Avinash, who leads WR India's integrated transport team. After that, we move into a panel discussion with a diverse set of voices. And to give you a sense of the conversation we're aiming for, here are a few questions that we'll be asking the panel on, the role of different stakeholders. How can we design this sort of a shared digital infrastructure that lowers barriers for everybody to scale and innovate? And what can be the intermediate practical steps that we can take in this direction? With that, let's get started. I'd like to invite Avinash onto the stage for the context of the presentation.
Hey, thanks, Rajit. I would like to welcome all. Good afternoon to everyone, all the participants, panelists, and my colleagues from WRI India. I would like to welcome you again for Connect Karo and to this session on connecting the dots, unlocking mobility with shared digital infrastructure. Before I start with the presentation, as Rajit mentioned, this is a short presentation where I will set the context, like what we are working towards, and then it will be followed by a panel discussion. So largely, as Rajit pointed out, this journey we started 2 years back. In 23, we talked about the shared sort of data standards, the common data standards, how it can help in the public transportation for better operations, better monitoring, and better planning sort of thing. Last year, we released an approach which is about how the DPI approach, if adopted, can help the ecosystem. This year, we are taking that conversation forward. Here we will talk about what should be the principles on which this entire digital infrastructure should be planned, so that it becomes a shared, sort of like a common rails, where innovations and choice will ride on top of it. So here, if you see, what does commuter wants? Commuter wants information before the journey so that they can plan in a better way, during the journey so that they can execute it properly, and after the journey for the records purposes. Same goes with the operators. Like any public transport operators, they need this sort of an information beforehand to better plan, during to better monitor, and then efficiency improvement in terms of post journey. This information will help them sort of bring in more efficiency to the system. The question is, does this data exist? I would say yes, data exists. But is this data usable? Or is this data available to any of the stakeholders, whether commuters or public transport operators or authorities? I would say no. There are multiple challenges in this. During the panel, we'll deliberate on these points. So largely, our learning, or I would say like what we have experienced so far is all the systems operate in silos. So what does this is it increases the cost of technology of adoption for the operators and for the commuters as well. The other thing, as I pointed out, the real-time data, if it is available, how it can sort of help. But none of the cities are able to get hands on the real-time data. Whatever the ITMS system they are currently using, it lacks actionable information for any decision maker to improve on the system. Most of these systems are tightly sort of interlocked. That limits the innovation and the scalability part of it. So this is the problem that we've experienced. I would just like to highlight, this is not about any one product or any one vendor. This is what we feel is, this is how the system is built or designed for. That is the problem. How can we solve for it? So that's the last thing. Now, sorry for that. So, like how, like reimagining the needs. So up until now, when we have tried to scale mobility digitally, what we have thought is bring in more buses, add more sort of shared mobility services, more routes, more apps. So that's the growth. But that growth is linear. So here's another way to think about scale. Through the lens of network approach, I will bring in the analogy of a communication network, how it evolves over the decades, like right from 1960 onwards to the current state. So this first approach is where, in the first stage, one provider broadcasts many users. So this is like a radio tower. You keep on increasing the radio towers, you increase your catchment areas, more audience you will cater to. So this is what it started off. Now, if I compare this with the mobility, so it is about building a one large mobility app and trying to push more and more users to start adopting it. That is how growth will happen, but that will limit it to a sort of a linear growth. The other way of thinking about this is in this multiple providers link to each other one by one. This is what Ethernet did. That's better, but each integration adds complexity. So switching becomes a challenge. So if you want to transition from one vendor to other, it could become a challenge, but it's still better than the first one. The third that we are talking about is where shared standards, open specs and API change the game. Now any operator, fintech, startup or city agency can plug in and form new groups instantly. That's when innovation becomes exponential. New use cases will come up, services we didn't even plan for will come up eventually. So the point here is extending this analogy of evolution of communication network to mobility is to clear that the way we connect is more important than to how many we connect. Now if I talk about rethinking the approach, like so we are building a shared digital infrastructure, not another app. If the focus can be on building the digital rails once with innovation and choice riding on top, there is enough incentive for the ecosystem to start creating or start developing the solution. So now if you look into the image on the right hand side, so it is like there are multiple cities. In each of the cities there could be multiple vendors providing different types of solutions. One could be ticketing, payments, tracking. So it's not about if we have different vendors then these modules are not interconnected. Even with the same module, so like the example of City 2, same operator provides all three services, but the information is not flowing across the modules. So that's how the current ecosystem is. What we are seeing is with the adoption of this image, irrespective of who is the vendor, what is the module that they are delivering, if they are interconnected, the information will flow very efficiently across each of these layers. Not only within the same sort of need or a particular system, say buses or metros, but across every mobility services. So this approach, does it have gone anywhere? So before we talk mobility, a quick proof point. India already runs on shared digital rails. UPI showed that a common interface lets many apps and banks interoperate at scale. ONDC is doing the same for commerce, basically linking buyers, sellers, and logistics. Upyog lets cities reuse the same stack to roll out services quickly. The pattern is clear, like the shared identifiers, open APIs, and conference testers unlock choice and lower integration cost. Our ask is simple. Apply this playbook to buses, to routes, stops, vehicles, and schedule events as shared rails. Then let the ecosystem build great tools on top of it. Now think of mobility like blocks, the Lego blocks that we're talking about. So we define a few common pieces and how they interconnect. Then each city will pull up their whatever is required for them. They can build any solution on top of it. Because the blocks share registries and open interfaces, new tools will plug in and old ones can be replaced with low risk. This keeps control with the mobility service providers slash operators and invites more innovation from the market. Build the blocks once, reuse them across the cities. So now, how to go ahead about it? So it's not like we want to change all the system in one go. We can identify a single piece, a single module, or a single use case. We can start from it, and then slowly and gradually, when we see that there is a success or there is how smoothly this transition is happening, we can pass it on to the other modules. So what this will do is we'll keep the cost and risk down by changing one block at a time. Interfaces could be versioned, and whatever the backward compatible upgrades could be thought for the better integration. When needs grow, we keep on adding the modules instead of rebuilding. A simple change process with shared test and a release calendar keeps surprises low. We also plan the exit upfront, like at a handover, who will be the owner of the data, how the data will exchange hands. So all this could be taken care of. The goal is not zero complexity. However, the goal is zero rigidity. It should be flexible enough. Now, this new approach, these are the different types of building blocks that we are talking about. Like, these are the basic key architecture principles. Those building blocks should be the minimalist or reusable building blocks. They should be interoperable, diverse, and inclusive innovation. Then federated and decentralized building blocks. It's like anybody can build any single block, but it should be usable by the others. And then security and privacy should be taken care of at the starting point only. To make, so this is what the right approach or what it need to be, the right architecture and process of the work at scale. To make shared rails work, we need more than tech. We need a way to run and govern it. 5 basics include many players in design, use strong software practices, manage change with a clear playbook, lock in data rights and exit terms from day one, and buy open reusable paths for operators, mobility service providers, and city keeps choice. With this base, upgrades are safer and innovation is faster. So with this, I would like to hand it over to Abhishek now for the panel discussion. And I would also like to invite all the panelists, start with Mr. Vivek Ogra, Mr. Prashant Tiwari, Roli Agarwal, Manish Srivastav, Dr. Shiv Kumar, and Abhishek.
Thanks, Avinash. So, thank you for that wonderful presentation and setting the stage for this discussion. I'm Abhishek. I'm basically a DPI and the shared digital infrastructure enthusiast at the core. Rest of it is all fluff. My role in the panel discussion today would be to leverage the experience as well as the expertise to kind of really make it real, both in mobility as well as the learnings that's coming from the other sectors. Because when we have people like Manish and Roli and others who are here, who have done it in multiple different contexts, it's also good to learn from them. So that would be my role. Can I just operate from here, or yeah, maybe.
Hey, if you want, you can hold your chair.
No. I think this is perfectly fine. So let's begin with people who have been involved in mobility. We just heard Avinash talk about some of the challenges. We also heard him talk about a way of a new approach, right? Going from siloed systems, which we've been having so far, to a networked approach kind of a thing. So I think Vipul, Rolly, Prashantji, you've been in the mobility space. How much all of this resonates with you? That these challenges, and what is the cost implications and the progress implications you have seen because of these challenges coming into the play? So if each one of you can kind of take 2 minutes and talk about your experiences, that whatever Avinash talked about, how have you experienced them in reality in your work?
Hello. When we talk about this particular road network for the city mobility, we always see that the city mobility is oh, city mobility is more like there is a set of data against which the bus is tracked. Now, when we talk about this road network, and road network, there is a route network. So whenever we track the bus is tracked against the route. And when we find this particular, we find that most of our routes are following the same pattern. They are passing through the same set of roads. There may be alternative roads are which are becoming it. And once I start overlapping all these routes, so I will find that there are certain stretches where there are too many routes are passing, and because of their schedule, it is creating a time when there is a sudden congestion is building up because of the buses. Bus being a bigger vehicle when passes through so many buses, means this is happens. I give one classic example is that there is this bridge Gita Colony flyover which is on the Yamuna. On one side of it is the ISBT bridge, and the other side is the ITO bridge. You will feel lot of buses going between on these two bridges, but there are very less buses which are passing through the Gita Colony bridge. So it is basically we are creating a congestion point when we analyze this route. And why it is happening is that there are so many roads which are coming up owned by the different agency, and when we design our route network, we never take concern of the road which are available. So we are not diversifying this.
So the data is not available. It's not
This data is something which is not available, and because of the historical reason, whenever we create a new route, we are creating on the existing data. These are the bus stops, these are the points which are created. Second thing which I find, means this is what we had observed is also, because of whenever there is a junction coming up, the crossing, the two roads are intersecting, the traffic junction is coming up. Now, how much time this traffic junction is like a bus stop, a virtual bus stop, where there is no boarding and alighting is happening. So, whenever we plan our schedule, we give a certain time to a particular trip. We sometimes miss how much time the bus is spending on these different traffic junctions which are coming up. A new traffic junction coming up on an existing route will change, add some 3-4 minutes or 5 minutes in the total trip time. So I tried, because this data, now the road network data is owned by the different agencies, MCD, PWD, NHA, different whichever agency. The traffic light data is owned by the traffic police, by their vendor. And when I have to design my route network, or whenever I have to share this particular, even I don't find this data on the Google map also sometimes. This traffic light I was
Actually,
trying to...
that's a great segue to ask Google Map about it. Maybe Rolly, if you want to add some perspective to it.
So I'll go back to the original question that you were asking, and that was a great presentation, Avinash. I think such a great summary of all the challenges that the industry is facing. I'm sure it resonated with many of you. So from our perspective, when we think of mobility, for India, getting mobility right is extremely important, right? It directly impacts individual and collective productivity, economic impact, right? And just the state of our minds and our society. So I think getting it right is really important. The summary that Avinash made there on the various challenges, I think we all face them. So if I had to, spotlight a few, what's been said by my co-panelists, the lack of data, right? So if you think about mobility and what does that mean in the India context, an average person on the street uses more than one mode, right? Again, think about how do you travel in your day? Are you using only a bus or are you using only a metro? Are you only driving, right? I think the average person on the street uses more than one mode. So there's definitely a need to connect different modes. There's a need to make this data discoverable to more entities. If the data is made discoverable to more entities, you can expect more innovation to happen. That innovation will then directly impact the quality of our lives, right? So I think there's definitely a need to do more with creating shared data, shared infrastructure, shared understanding, if you may, for mobility in the country.
Thank you, Rahul. I mean, that brings me to maybe Vivek. You've already been involved in doing some of these things on the ground in multiple contexts. I mean, if I may extend this question, because we have established the resonance with the presentation, that where do you feel these integrations fall most often? I mean, what happens? Why are these systems still not interconnected? And when we try to connect them, what happens? And what kind of downstream effects that plays because they are so hard to integrate?
Thank you. I think I'll take a step back because if you have to really solve this maze of how do we create a collaborative environment of mobility, we have to understand symptomatically where are we going wrong. So, and it stems from the experience I've had with public transport agencies for a couple of decades. See, in India, if you see first from the technology side, we are living in a oligopoly market. There are only 3 or 4 big players who are doing what they are doing, and they've been doing that for about 15, 20 years. The first symptomatic problem is technology is not broad-based. It has not been mainstreamed. That means it is not available with smaller players. It's not open enough. The procurement strategies are rigid. So all of that has to change. Unless it becomes a mainstream technology open enough for smaller ones to really adopt and deliver in cities. See, we're talking about not 10, 15 cities. We're talking about 150 plus urban environments, right? Now, 4 companies, 5 companies can't do that. And it's also not the way they can really deliver, right? Therefore, the first symptomatic problem is ability of technology to really go to nook and corner and availability of that to the smaller players. So that means there has to be some kind of, so when we are talking about DPI, I would say there has to be a first step also of DPG, which enables the market activation at a large scale. That's the population scale activation. Second problem symptomatically is our institutions are not geared up to this conversation. They don't see this as a existential threat to them. They don't see, because I think it comes from the fact that their existence itself is in question. The supply side in our cities is acutely short. A city which should have 4,000 buses has 800 buses. So if you are inadequate in your supply itself, where is the question of quality of service? Where is the question of creating a collaborative environment? So the point is, are we really looking at technology to kind of create those insights of saying, what is the art of possible? Now, can we solve supply overnight? No. But can we solve the scale of services? Answer is yes. Therefore, the DPI can come in to say, okay, can there be a more better public-private partnerships and therefore create an environment which can deliver for the city's mobility challenges. So third part I would say is, again, do we understand the data fabric of mobility systems? I think there's a fundamental disconnect. You go to 10 cities, they understand data differently. See, while we try to trivialize and simplify it by saying we need ETA, we need ETD, ETA, and we need basically the payment structure. But is it just that? The answer is no. So who is talking about how do we meaningfully connect? who is talking about stitching the trips? That itself is important because it's not about just time, it's about how do you stitch the need of a consumer. So I think there are many things that would play out, and DPI for sure is needed. How do we ensure that it becomes a mandate? So I think the problem I see is there's nobody mandating it. It's left to people's imagination. Can I do it? We did pilot in 6 cities, and I have profound understanding and learnings from those. It took 1 year. Tech itself was very easy. In one of the cities, just took 15 days to get through the integration. It was breezing fast. But the problem was they didn't see value. They didn't see sustainability of how they will move it forward. Where is the need to do it? Who will fund it? There are basic questions of how to get it.
Well, thank you for that. I think we'll move to that also. But I mean, if I have to summarize from the mobility, we are getting that feeling that we all have that kind of resonance with what Avinash was talking about, and not just the resonance at the level we talked about here, but a deeper resonance that the many other underlying things need to be changed before that. So that kind of, that's very interesting to then segue to the our guests from other domains. So Dr. Shiv, Manish, maybe we can begin with Dr. Shiv first. What was the kind of challenges that you guys had faced in those in your own work areas, which kind of made you think about that this is not going to be solved by again the siloed solutions or doing one thing at a time? And then, I mean, if I may kind of extend that question, what was that single decision or a single push that you guys could make to actually tip the scale in the favor of doing shared infrastructure? And thank you, Vivek, for bringing that the DPG is the underlying bedrock for the DPI. So of course, doing the public goods first and then going into the shared infrastructure. So if you can kind of take a couple of minutes and give that perspective from
Thank you, Abhishek. First, I will give you in a very brief, the global perspective, where in the case of the shared digital infrastructure, where the world is moving. Then I will come to the India, what are the challenges basically we are facing. If you see in the so-called developed countries, there is a lot of momentum on the digital infrastructure, and there are the different use cases or the case studies which we can share sometime. If we talk in data sharing mode, so recently you might have seen the communication from the ministry that data sharing is now becoming a reality in India, which was not possible. Where is the data in India if you talk? It is with the MNOs, mobile network operators. It is with the toll operators. And if the data is available to us, maybe then we can do some sort of planning using the AI tools and the different type of technologies. As my Vivek ji has told, that a lot of technological development is happening. Yes, this is the age of the decade, and the digital age, where you talk about AI, IoT, or talk blockchain, or even talk about the edge or cloud computing. This technology are enabling us. But the governance, the standards, interoperability, and you might have seen, I'll give you the two example. One from the, in the beginning of NASA told that about the telecom sector. Okay, you might have seen what were happening in earlier days. Whenever a mobile network was set up by one of the OEM or the vendor, say Ericsson or Nokia or Motorola, whosoever, then in a particular city or the couple of cities or state, the network was set up by one OEM. Then if the another OEM was to be taken in the next tender, then whole previous network was to be swapped by the new vendor. So this I can tell because I have been part of it, and I have done the swapping and all this thing in Ericsson, Nokia, Qualcomm. I had been in this arena. So these were the challenges, and to some extent or great extent we can say our smart city project didn't go through like the way we wanted. This is the one of the example, because we have gone for the proprietary solutions, and again there is a challenge that if one have failed or if you want to swap one, then again we have to invest a lot of money. So legacy, we cannot use the legacy network. Similarly here also, if the one single thing I will tell is the interoperability. The standards which has come up in the international arena, they cannot be directly used by us. We have to do the customization. Our environment is different. Our heterogeneous networks, heterogeneous traffic, and the road infrastructure is the, that is the one of the largest in the world now, after US. So we have the huge infrastructure. The technologies has to be now enable that infrastructure in order to make the use of this and in order to basically unlock the mobility. So with that, thank you.
Thanks. So I'll just share our experience. I'm basically CTO with Eager Foundation. Our journey started in 2003. A lot of the focus was in Bangalore. A lot of the IT companies were opening in Bangalore, and a lot of the challenges that were starting. I came to Bangalore in '96, and all the problems of traffic and all those issues, we still see it at a different scale in Bangalore, but a lot of those problems were already starting to see in the early 2000s. And that is when Nandan and all started Eager Foundation, primarily to look at what is the role of technology to solving these problems, and we still focus on that. So initially, like a lot, we started working with various departments in the government in a very siloed manner, right? Building their, applying technology to digital systems within the department, helping them basic digitization, and that went only so far. Then in Chennai, I'll tell you, what we did was we had the opportunity to build a full city-wide municipal system. It's an ERP system. It's shared, is the data shared. The problem with siloed system is because one department can't access another department system, and then slowly you start connecting the systems with each other, and it becomes an integration mess. Slowly, initially it works, and then slowly it becomes very complicated, and it stops working. And then you need cross-department coordination. One file will move to another file. Getting any data is like, you have to go to the principal secretary, he will write to the other guy, then the other guy will tell the IT guy. That's broadly how a lot of the data movement happens, and that really can't, is not the way to work from a scaling perspective. This challenges, then people move to a ERP kind of thing. Can't we build an integrated system by itself where data is fundamentally shared? And that's the approach that we did in Chennai. Chennai actually runs in a ERP system. We built that system for them, and it works decently well. Right now, you have integrated data. A lot of the departments are shared. In many ways, the ERP is a shared infrastructure for at least those departments in a limited manner. We have other challenges in Chennai because they have not been because the complications of the systems, they have not been able to take the handover. So there is a capacity issue that we need to talk, especially when you're talking about the government. That piece is a very important piece. What we learned, then of course AP looked at what was done in Chennai, and they said, can you do this for all cities in AP? And that gave us an opportunity where we build a shared municipal infrastructure for all cities in AP. So we have a single infrastructure built which runs all cities in AP, all processes from your birth registration, trade license, property tax to everything. It runs on a single infrastructure in AP. When we tried replicating that into Maharashtra, because we thought it is a good model at that point in time, and we tried replicating that to Maharashtra, it was a disaster. We failed significantly because a lot of the rules, local rules and everything got intertwined while you're building these systems, and when you try to replicate, it doesn't work, right? And then the vendor who was trying to replicate was completely dependent on us to trying to replicate those systems. So a lot of these, so replication is not that easy. Then we said, okay, how do we do this? And that's when a lot of the learnings from Aadhaar and UPI were starting to come back to us, and we said, look, you can't build these monolithic systems. You need to build systems, modular, open building blocks, which can be stitched together in different contexts in a different manner. And that's where we moved to a more modular, open source kind of architecture. We said the underlying building blocks, these are context free. So first you unbundle The common services, you unbundle basically systems of record, which is known as registries. You design them as independent, whether it's like in your context, it will be the route registry, the road registry. These data needs to be fundamentally available to everybody, right? And those are basic known pieces, and so that is one part of the puzzle. How do you get the systems of record separated from the systems of transactions? And then the systems of transactions will vary depending on different cities or different, like Punjab, it will be different from Orissa, it will be different because those will be controlled by local policies and procedures. So if you unbundle that, then you give the opportunity of what is shared, right? There are common services, there's common data services. These can be built as shared pieces, and then on top, when you're building the systems of transactions, that can be built by the local institutions, whether it is within the state, whether it is the SIs. So today a lot of the Deloittes and the PwCs, and they basically use, so these are the two pieces that we built on Digit, that a common data infrastructure and common services infrastructure, and we made this open. And that is what is known as Digit. Eventually it got adopted as Upyog that you see with Mahua. And because it was open, they adopted it, they funded it, they're funding it, and because of that also adoption is happening in Kerala. SIs have adopted it. If we built everything, there was no incentives for the SIs to do anything with it. So I think where you stop, don't basically, if you do build everything, there's no reason for you break the market. So where are the fundamental market failures? How do you solve the problems for looking from purely market failure standpoint and bridge only those pieces with open modular building blocks, allowed for SIs to be interested in it, and it allowed Mahua to take it and then say, okay, we will put it as a shared infrastructure and invest money onto it, and so that process is going on. Today I think we are around in 1500 to 1800 cities we have covered. Hopefully as we progress, but government has put money behind it, so a lot of those, hopefully as we progress, this should roll out. So we are hoping in the next couple of years we should be able to cover most, even the smaller cities, with this kind of approach.
Thank you, Manish. And I think one of the key things that I'm noticing is that unbundling and rebundling, even Vivek spoke about it, that we need to understand all the context and then unbundle those contexts, see what's common to be the shared and what's unique to that context so that can be laid over it. So thank you for that. I'm just being mindful of time. So we are moving on to the next, because this is a rich topic and we can go much deeper into it. So moving on to the next aspect of it. So if we all decide, and I think there's a unanimous that there is some sort of a shared both infrastructure as well as underlying goods needed, which everyone creates together and then they rebundle into their own context. There is this next question that how should such a thing be governed and sustained, right? I mean, building is a one-time activity, but now this needs to be supported for the long term, both the underlying DPG as well as the shared infrastructure on top of it. So I'll just like kind of, if like everyone or like if someone wants to skip, that's okay. But if you could come up with that what should be the governance, how light touch or a heavy touch to the government, how much should the government be involved in the governance? Should it be the people who are doing it, like that kind of governance? So if you could all throw some light how you think about the governance as well as the sustainability of such efforts. And if maybe we can first go the non-mobility part first, because that's where it has happened more, and then we'll bring it back to that. Do those ideas apply into the mobility? And maybe Prashant, Aap and Vipul, maybe you can. Oh, sorry, Vivek, you can throw some light on that. That whether that will apply. So maybe if you can go with the non-mobilities first, starting with Dr. Shiv.
If we talk about, say, digital infrastructure, Manish very rightly said that there is a challenge of the funding. And in the funding models we have been working, we have identified that putting so much of the money, nobody would like to, not even government. Government has been putting a good amount of money, but beyond that, certainly, we cannot expect the government. Even the private partners, vendors, they don't see that when they will realize the money and how it will come. So it's very difficult, very challenging. So one of the concept, one of the model which in Japan, Professor Yoshino has been working, and we have been doing the study with him, like how the digital funding in the digital infrastructure can bring the spillover effect. What it happens is, like whenever there is some development, if you take it like non-digital infrastructure, suppose an airport is coming somewhere. So if you see that around the airport, the prices of the real estate goes very high, and all the business houses, knowledge, they come there, and the tax revenue collection that increases significantly in that area. If the tax revenue is coming up is increasing high through the digital infrastructure, through the different ways coming up of the say broadband network, which has basically been in the cases of the COVID, it has come up. So if the money which has been, or the fund which has been generated by the tax agencies, if the part of it is put back to the system, and through that, if the providers of the digital infrastructure, the vendors, they get part of the money, because this money which has been coming up is because the infrastructure has come up, digital infrastructure has come up. So
sort of a tool on the road, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So they are getting, so spillover effect, that's basically how it works. Through the different modes, like coming up of the policies, the mobility, national mobility, basically the architecture, which basically we have been working. Also the comprehensive smart. There have been the policies in the silos, but India don't have the comprehensive smart mobility policy. So we need to work on this type of basically frameworks, and work with the government and come up in the mission mode. Basically the government is doing part of it, but it's not in the mission mode. Whatever is required, just I will take only one sentence I will tell. Most of you may be knowing that India is the highest in the case of the fatalities, accidents. We contribute to say 14 to 15% of the death rate of the world global. And how many vehicles we have? Just 1.5% of the global vehicles. 1.5% is contributing to the 15% of the death rate, which is a very serious issue. Our honorable minister and all, they have been talking on different platforms that it is impacting even 3% of the basically our GDP every year. So it requires like a mission mode project, like the Swachh Bharat or the toilets and all these things that come up. And this is a very socio-economic problem, very serious problem. The whole families get disrupted, whole businesses get disrupted, and we need to address such issues.
No, thank you. I think you, now because we started picking up sustainability before governance, I think really I'd like to bring you in before I begin, Manish. Google Maps is a digital infrastructure, and in most forms it's digital public infrastructure, right? I mean, everyone is using it, but it is also made sustainable. So what would be your thought process around learning from that? I'm not saying that every infrastructure can become like that, but I think if you could throw some light on the sustainability of such efforts.
I'll try and answer what you're asking me, but also maybe some of the previous things that have been said. So if you think of Google Maps, we are useful at a stage where we are able to navigate you better, right? We are able to answer that query of, I want to go from point A to point B, this is the mode that I'm using, and we are able to give you really good information about your mode of transport, and even if it is multiple modes. We've done this successfully elsewhere in the world, right? Where we are able to give you not just static information, but we are also able to give you very rich information about the road, about public transport. We are also able to tell you if your bus is running on time, it is late. We are giving you information about road disruptions, right? So we've made your part of the industry, on part of the operators, on part of the government, is to create data, share data, and create experiences similar to what I just described. We've recently launched with Mumbai buses, so with BEST. This happened, I think, just a couple of months ago. Great case study, especially for a city like Mumbai. We'd love to do this across more and more cities, right? But I will spotlight on I think what's been said by my co-panelists, and this is not trivial, I mention this everywhere I go, is data can be a connecting glue, right? But it needs to exist first, and it doesn't exist, right, in most cases. So if I had to come up with a wish list, I'll talk about creating more toolkits, creating more templates, creating maybe more governance models around data standardization. GTFS is a good example. It's being used world over by, many ecosystem players. In India, I couldn't say that the understanding doesn't exist or the adoption doesn't exist. I think we just need to accelerate it. I've personally found a lack of capability since, that's been talked about. How do we at scale train people, to create it should be a no-brainer, right? How do we reach that stage where GTFS is not the reason why this data is not getting created or shared, right? And then I think we've got enough case studies in the country now to create open platforms, open data platforms where this data can then become discoverable, right? So I think I'd say we just need to maybe shine a light on how do we use what's been done in other verticals specifically for the benefit of mobility in the country.
Well, thank you. I mean, if you combine those two, it feels like if you make the infrastructure right enough and it's usable enough, it gives the right experience, then there can be multiple modes of sustaining it, right from taxing to direct payments, as Dr. Shiv said, that the whole ecosystem around it will be willing to pay because they feel that value out of it. And I think even Digit is that example of that the ministry created funds for it because it was the right infrastructure put in the place. So Manish, maybe I'm just cutting short on the sustainable part, but let's move to the governance part, and then I'd like to take, yeah.
I just wanted to make one more point since, talked about sustainable. I want to give two examples very quickly, which is accident-prone zones, since, road safety was being discussed, and EV, right? We want to encourage the country to move towards EV. So two things and two data types, and I'm shining a light because I hope many of you are working, in these spaces, will be how do we again create a playbook and to build these data sets, right? So again, there are no silos, and those silos start speaking to one another early enough versus a condition where again we've spent years, trying to build these data sets for the country. So I'll spotlight those two.
Yeah. So Manish, and then we'll move to you, Vivek, and then Prashantji to kind of also get a view on the same thing being the governance and the sustainability in the mobility sector. But very quickly, both on sustainability and governance, if you can take a minute.
Yeah. So the best way I think I can highlight this is, we do a lot of pilots, and most of the pilots succeed, but after that it fails. And therein lies a very interesting phenomena, because we come in, when we do the pilots, we'll somewhere bring the funding, whether it's coming from philanthropic or external capital comes in, experts come in, and a lot of administrative attention comes in, right? And all these three things are fundamentally scarce, right? The technology, like you said, technology is, the technical solution is generally, once you get an expert, you will get the technical solution. And then after the pilots, all these disappear, right? And that's why things don't scare. So unless until we think through about the economics of this whole thing, right, as to how the economic model of this is going to run. So what we have noticed is, simple things like whenever we have deployed these municipal systems where there is property tax and property tax picks up and adoption of property tax happens, the system sustains itself. There is a lot of fundamental inherent built into the system saying, okay, the money is also coming and service delivery is also happening, and the system fundamentally, and you can see that in AP it works. In Punjab it is dwindling. Why? Because the property tax hasn't picked up, and then there is no sustainability of those kind of things. So I think thinking through what is what we are building, what kind of transactions that we are building, and I think somewhere a lot of the data discussion also is separated away from the money discussions. And unless until you combine the data and money discussion, then it becomes transactional standards. A lot of people keep talking about data standards, and I wish they talked a lot more about transactional standard, where it was, I will give you value where I will also get the thing back. And once we start thinking about transactional standards where money is also a part of the puzzle, I think therein lies governance, value, exchange, model, sustainability. Many of those things start becoming interesting. Otherwise, then if we disconnect many of these things, then it doesn't work.
If I may move to Wayne, all of these things, how do you think in the mobility, and maybe after that, Sandy, if you can also throw some light on that.
So a couple of things that come to my mind is one is on the structure of how mobility is structured in the country. It's a concurrent subject. Part of it is run by regulations by the central government, and a lot of other things are run by the state government. So that's a fundamental problem, because whatever we might think at the central level, that really doesn't percolate to the states, and states have their own agenda. Cities specifically have their own agenda. So it's a complex maze of how it would kind of fall in place. Nevertheless, let's take an example of a very recent collaborative effort that has really paid off. And I think most of us in this room must be using DigiYatra. It's an example of how industry and government collaborative can solve for citizen challenges. And it was solved in a very beautiful way, in the sense, privacy first was their fundamental rock bread. We will not keep data. It's a database less program. So that there's confidence that nobody is using your personal identifier data. Second, they unbundled the whole approach, which is airports will implement the airport side, and DigiYatra will implement the facial recognition and the verifiable credential, and it will pass the credentials in whatever form. Now, if we can have a parallel governance system of champions to start with, everybody will not do it. They also looked at major airport operators, DigiYatra taking the lead, Airport Authority of India coming in with 25%, and they started it. Now, if you really see, it is citizen who is demanding on the airport that why don't you have DigiYatra? Now, that's an inflection point. I think that's the way the governance really should be looked at in this case also, and government certainly has to play a very, very proactive role in this case to start with. It's a classic case of activating an industry program. Government comes in, takes to the inflection point, gives it to the industry, and then market takes over. I think that's the standard way of really activating this program.
Participatory governance and the benefits are so high, then the demand itself kind of sustains the whole thing.
I was by going through the previous discussions, what I was thinking that the first thing what is there which is a hindrance in creating a DPI for the public transit is that if the data is to be exchanged, what is the format, what is the standard in which the data is to be exchanged? So one example we had of this GTFS, and I myself was involved in one few projects where we had shared the data in the GTFS format. And this can be the starting step, and it can be further improved, like adding this particular traffic lights with virtual bus stops where nothing, or the new road data, the width of the road, the number of lanes, average speed of that particular road, so that this is available to designing the route network. So, and the second thing is that what the data is there is a physical data, like bus stop, traffic light, roads. This is a physical data which is owned by the different agencies. Bus stop is owned by the Department of Transport, road is by the different, traffic light is with the police, traffic police. So how these three different entities which are having a certain set of physical data, they digitize it, the first thing digitization of this, and then making it available in a format which is means that the format can be the standard can be further improved, and this thing can be added. Second thing is the virtual data, like the route. Route is not a physical thing, but it is something which is derived from using these three physical data, and which give us to the schedule and the and this will become what the public transit data is, what we want to share, what we want to make available, who are the owners. So the physical data to be digitization, that is governed by a certain common entity, the government, because the government is owning that asset. And from that, the transit agencies which are using it to generate their network and operations, which are generating another setup. So they may need to be nudged, or this thing that you have to make available this data, and how to use it, optimize your route, optimize your services. Different thing is that. The best, Mr. Manish has said that how to monetize this once the DPI is created, so it is made available to sustain it, because these changes are keep on happening. How to monetize it? But what are the agencies which need this data? Like public transit is basically a subsidized operation, which is fair. Fare box never meet the revenue. There is always a case of viability gap funding. So why the government will come to play? Why should I add another layer of and who will fund it? So one has to think of that what are the cases where this data can be, who needs this data if we are, because it's a people's movement data, then these are the monetary agency, advertising agency, who needs this data? They need what are the places where the peoples are aggregating, what are the routes, what are the average speed, so they can put some advertisement panels which can be given to the MCD, MCD can give to the advertising. So those type of use cases which we had thought of, and because I had done one project in Delhi, where the first Delhi transport stack, which is the first time the DPI. But again, the same problem comes, like we never get the traffic light data, we never get the road data. And where we see is that with the coming of the cameras being fitted, the buses become the source of information which road is needing the repair, as it is moving on the particular road.
So if I may comment, Alex, it most looks like that while we design them as DPGs and shared infrastructure, they still need to be thought through as value offerings, like any product company will think about that. Because unless people see the value, there's not going to be route for sustaining on that. I'm so sorry. I mean, it's interesting discussion. We can go on for another 2 hours, but I have a time limit given. Do we have 10 more minutes, or should we? Yeah. So do we have, because there's one more theme which is very critical, and I think. Oh, thank you. So we are 5 of us, 1 minute each on one very, very important theme. So we have talked about need, we have talked about governance and sustenance, but there is another thing that the users of those things should trust it. And the trust is in two things. One is trust in data, that what is being done with my data, and you touched upon it when you spoke about DJ Yatra. And the other trust is the trust of the supply side, which is like, if I join this, am I losing my competitive edge? If I join this, am I losing the control that I have over my business? So if we can all take a minute each to kind of, given that what do you think about that when coming from the shared infrastructure perspective? Maybe we can begin from you and at Manish.
Actually, what I see is that this physical data, what we thought about, this is existing there. Means I don't see there is much something to be lose. Means the owning authorities, like bus stop is a physical asset. It is there. It is not moving.
Some data is public data. I mean, why should we worry about it? It should be available.
Only thing is that it needs to be digitized. If it is digitized, then it in a standard, only then it can be exchanged. Only then the other peoples can be used it.
Sure.
See the data. I talked that you see on the tolls. The personal data is everywhere. You can find your data on the tolls, you can find on the operators, you can find everywhere. So the trust or no trust, your personal information is everywhere. Now coming up to the infrastructure, the secured, safer, sustainable infrastructure with the resilience will certainly bring the trust once we build up a good infrastructure. And there is no other way. The technologies are available today, other than the AI, the blockchain, which is basically providing the security of the data. So this type of technologies can be used with the good governance, which plays a vital role.
Thank you.
I think it's a very, very important point because unless you provide for competitive advantage in the market, you will never see innovation flowing in the market. So therefore, uh, first of all, I think we should take a minimalistic data approach. What is necessary and can be shared can be a publicly shared infrastructure from data standpoint. Beyond that, I think we should leave it to the private agencies and others to really innovate. So, for example, in this case, what are we really talking about? We're talking about supply to be given in the marketplace, which is essentially ETA or availability of a ride and the cost of ride. Beyond that, I think we should not govern. We should leave it to the private operators to provide for whatever innovative services they can and leave it to the consumer who wants to consume it. Therefore, there will be mushrooming of those innovative solutions. For example, in this case, I feel Trip Stitch itself is a business. I mean, a person would say, I don't want to run anything else. I just want to give an efficient trip stitch. That's it. And I will charge a premium on that. Because every time I stitch a trip, I stitch a right trip. Maybe that's how the market has to evolve. That's what I will feel.
Thank you. Roli?
You know, I think a lot of great points have already been covered. I don't know what else I can add, but I think this point that Vivek's bringing up, which is what is absolutely like important and necessary to be shared, differentiating that from the other stuff is important to bring in comfort, right? And maybe that is what we need, is to then be able to draw a clear distinction between what's the basic minimum that will help improve mobility in the country, and then what are the other things which are not necessarily, you know, there's a need to put it out there. So if you're talking about analytics, which will help improve operations, which will help improve monetization, I will admit we've, you know, seen concerns in the market where agencies have said we don't want to expose our data because then, say, a ride-hailing company might use that to create, you know, offers for that last mile. As a consumer, I would argue that that's a good thing, right? Because you're creating, again, better mobility for the person on the street. But, you know, again, like bubbling up, being able to say what is absolutely important, fundamental to share, and what's not should create some comfort in the system.
Yeah. So Manish, when it comes, I mean, maybe you can go a little further because in Digit you have achieved a lot of that, and that's what built that trust in Digit. So maybe you want to talk about it, how it's really helped by following those principles that these guys have talked about minimalism and other things.
So I think, while I remembered something while people are saying, so the trust word, I think one is you can, again, unbundle it into three fundamental questions. One, the harm part, saying any transaction, is it doing harm to any of the parties involved in the transaction? So that's, it shouldn't do any harm to any of parties. Second is the fairness part. Even if it is not doing harm, is it fair? It's a different question than harm. And then third part is, which is whether it is creating value or not, whether it is good for any of the parties or not. So I think there are, unless until you answer all the three questions, the transaction basically doesn't proceed. So it has to be, it shouldn't create harm, it should be fair, and it should create value. All the three conditions need to be met. And I think, so privacy, of course, that's where you get into the privacy discussion. In terms of, and there are designs of how do you solve, and very important in technology, a lot of interesting techniques are now coming through to solving for the privacy problem. So I can prove a lot of things to you without me sharing a lot of data. So a lot of those techniques, privacy preserving techniques, are now becoming available. What happens behind Digi Yatra, the verifiable credentials, a lot of these are very fascinating set of architectural possibilities that are available now to solve many of the complicated problems that privacy and all of this kind of brings about. So of course security is a given. If you don't have security, there is no privacy. So all privacy is built on top of security. So basic security, I think a lot of things that I think Abhishek also talking about is and eventually security also comes down to capacity issues, because we work with municipal systems. The capacity to deal with all the complicated set of things is not there. A lot of onus rests on us that we test these things systems out, and when we put it into their hands, it is already secured to a sufficient extent. And security by default, it is by default locked down. A lot of those things becomes a very important piece of the puzzle. Since I can go on this, but I'm saying.
Thank you. I think we should open it up to the audience. There might be a few very, very interesting questions.
Hello, everyone. My name is Parul Sharma, and I'm an urban planner and founder of a startup called City Scanner, which deals with information services for navigation and trip planning for pedestrians and cyclists in the last mile. So thank you very much for your remarks today, everybody. I think this is one of the most important conversations in urban development and actual solutions for mobility. My question is, I agree with most of you, especially Rolly, you, about we need data. We just need a lot of data about everything. Everything needs to be digitized so we can really create an innovative environment. Let's start there. Let's have the data and leave it up to people to decide what they can do with that data to truly innovate. And the government of India has led a lot of initiatives and platforms now where there is this sort of start of open shared data. But the extent and quality of that data is for all to see. It's questionable at best. How valuable it is highly questionable. So my question now is, yes, we need it, but isn't there an opportunity now to create a process which is publicly driven? This is the kind of data we need. It's not enough. And how can we fix that gap? Clearly, it's a start, but it's not enough. And the urgency with which we can see municipal issues, civic issues, city level issues, mobility is one tiny aspect of that. But data is the beginning for innovation. And we're talking about private solutions to fix a lot of government gaps that should be happening by government. So why aren't there processes to say, hey, this is not enough. We need more. We need better quality. And Google Maps is a great asset. Again, it's a private entity that is doing something like that. But how do we bridge this gap? Shouldn't there be a participatory process where we're saying that this GIS data is not enough, it's static, it's old, it doesn't even cover the entire city, let alone, the state. What are, in some of your opinions, that we can do to highlight the need for more and better quality of data? Who can fill that gap? Open question.
Everyone?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm just being mindful because we want a couple of more questions. So basically, what to do about the data non-availability and the fact that people are shying away?
I just have a view. I think the gap I see is very clearly there are three V's that are missing in our thinking. See, when we look at data, and particularly in mobility, the three things very, very important. What is the volume of data you require? What is the veracity of the data? And what is the velocity of the data? Because in urban transport per se, let's talk about only urban transport, you're taking decisions every 10 seconds. So therefore the veracity and velocity becomes very, very important, because if you have to plan a trip, you might have a couple of thousand people looking at a trip, and you will have, let's say, a couple of other thousand vehicles which are going to be part of that decision making, right? Therefore the velocity of data and veracity is going to be very important. There is no standard per se which governs and says anybody in the mobility space, what is these three things? So, you start with understanding what do you want to share, why do you want to share, and where do you share. So I think that's, while we have data standards and everything else important, but I think these three things are very important. That will solve for many challenges that startups such as yours are trying to solve.
No, thank you. I would like to add a fourth V. What is the value offering against the data I am giving you? So I think that would also solve. But anyone else want to kind of quickly respond?
I'm just purely talking from a public administrator's viewpoint. And you'll understand where the problem is. One, if you and I were sitting at that seat, One, there is no policy. If I share this data with you, I don't know what is the implication to me. So one, I will, by default, I will not. I don't care. I am not going to take the risk of sharing the data because I don't know what will happen later, and I will become, you will open a vigilance case on me. So one, I will not share. So by default, behavior is not to share, right? Second, even if I share, you will do something with the data, something will go in the journalism. I don't know what will all this stuff is, and you will come back and hit with me saying your data itself is wrong. As I said, so we need to think a little more deeply about consequences of sharing of data, how the data policies are going to get designed. If you're going to tighten up the policies too much, then sharing becomes very hard for the system to itself to share the data. So I think, we know that data in the system is bad. Now, if you were the administrator and you are sharing this data, you're willing to share the data, you need to create stable policies that allow for data, even economic data, right? They come up with the data, then they revise the data, and a lot of things are allowed in that structure. So I think we need to think through how these data sharing mechanisms will work and who needs to share and what are the incentives or disincentives for people to share the data. And of course, again I'm coming back to the value of it. A lot of people, I have the data, I'm sharing this data. You're going to make API calls, who's going to maintain, manage that infrastructure? The cost of that, somebody's got to pay for it, right? How do we pay? Is it going, anyway, public systems are mostly crunched with cash. So you're asking additional systems to work. So a lot of those problems have to be deeply thought about.
We should add a fifth V, vigilance prevention against the data. That's a fifth V. Okay.
Thank you, everyone. So, my name is Nikhil, and I have been a product manager with an urban mobility startup. While I agree with the concept of a DPI in the mobility sector, particularly urban mobility, I want to understand when we look at from a user-centered view, what value propositions would it create for a user? For example, suppose that we have a DPI right now. आज हमारे पास सब कुछ है, and why would I use a DPI enabled app over any other ride hailing apps that are already there? For example, Uber, Ola, or anything for that matter. I come from this point because when UPI came, real-time payments was not there. So UPI solved that particular gap. When DigiYatra came, there was a problem where the check-in process used to take a lot of time, particularly in airports like Bangalore, Delhi, and Bombay. So I am just trying to put my head to this thought: ki, as a user, how would it help me so that I can build a product around it? Yeah, basically. To anyone, everyone.
I think I simply would say it just opens a world of possibilities. You know, when you look at DPI, it's not about technology per se. That's my personal view. It's not about technology. It's about the world of possibilities that you can really open up when you take an ecosystem approach. See, when you look at a mobility platform which is solving for a particular challenge, let's say somebody is solving for first mile, last mile, right? You're only looking at that. Versus when you look at DPI, you're also thrown up with so many other possibilities where you can create value to the consumer. See, end of the day, consumers have different preferences. Again, we can't bucket consumers into one silo that everybody wants the same thing. No, the city has different affluency characteristics. They have different needs. Therefore, when you look at DPI, look at a DPI from the social and economic construct, that it will open up possibilities for different type of people needing different services. Therefore, it just opens up the whole lot of possibilities that one could really work on. I think that's how DPI should be really looked at. Other than the fact that it solves for a bigger challenge that the city has. How do we have a more collaborative environment of travel and so on and so forth, reduces reliance on private travel. But I think it just opens up possibilities in future.
I'll take a user point of view to your question. So I think it's fair to say that user needs differ, right? In a market like India, in a country like India, they differ in a really big way. So if you think of like, when I think about the experience, I want to be able to address every single user. Now imagine a scenario where you came to a map, right? And I could tell you as Google Map, this is the closest bus stop and auto rickshaw stand and metro stand, and your next mode, whatever that may be, leaves at this time. This is what it's going to cost you. This is the whole journey plan. Now, depending on your situation and your use case, you're able to then take a data driven decision to say मुझे पैसे बचाने हैं या मुझे जल्दी जाना है या क्या कंसिडरेशन क्या है, वेदर कैसा है, राइट? उसके बेसिस पे आप डिसीजन ले पाओ. Imagine that scenario. That would be so beautiful, right? If you were able to do that across modes and do it like, just using your mobile phone.
Just adding, just a thought. See, a lot of people in a street journey would say, I'll take an auto rickshaw from home, go to bus stand, take the bus, and take a taxi to the last mile. Now, this data thrown to you, ETA, ETD, ETA, ETD. What if somebody just plans a service, track my ETD, and to all the service providers, they provide real-time track of how that vehicle is moving with respect to this vehicle. Just imagine how it will solve inter-agency coordination. The cancellations will go down, predictability. You could have AI to say, okay, if this is not moving, can I give this ride to somebody else and therefore in real time move the ride? There's a whole lot of possibilities that can come from DPI.
And by the way, none of this is like, piece of imagination. This is happening elsewhere in the world, right? तो ये मतलब real situations हैं जो हो रही हैं और यहाँ हो सकती हैं, right? And I think, again, some of this exists. It just needs to be shared and be connected.
No, I think while you're a product manager, you are better suited to answer this. So one is, if you look at simply like Make My Trip and just track back a lot of the things that exist for Make My Trip to really come about, right? That is one way to think about it. Second is when you look at user at the center, and I think Avinash put that diagram, discovery, planning, he put saying what is the journey that the user takes to making this whole thing. And you can change the user to an office goer, a woman or a child, and the whole thing, whole use case will emerge for you.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks for the point.
Yeah. So my question is, okay, fine. So my question is, as long as it's the government which is generating the data and it's the owner of the data, probably we can talk about making that data accessible and probably system integration. But how do you incentivize the private industry? So you have private operators generating a lot of data, and that data monetization is part of the business model. How do you incentivize then this kind of data to participate in a DPI? Because tomorrow we may have a lot of private operators, and data monetization becomes part of the business model. So then how do you ask them, okay, forget about your business models, make your data available for a public infrastructure and for better good without any monetary return? That's the question. Yeah.
Yeah, I think there are two pieces. Sorry, go ahead.
Your question is more like this Uber, Ola, because they are having so much. Actually, there are two things available. One is the data protection, because these are the private rights. So, and they are also having the user's identity. So, by aggregating this particular means how you want them to share the data. We are not asking them to share the individual trip-wise data. It is basically aggregation of the data, that what are the maximum OD pairs these are, and why this data is needed. This data is needed. One is the normal safety, because of that is the standard, that is the governance part. Second part is to create some infra on the road, that if there are too many trips are originating, IPT trips are originating from a particular point to another particular point, then you have to create resting places, parking places for this particular. Otherwise, how these vehicles will park? They will be haphazardly parked. And we know that there are so much volume of activities generated, vehicles are generated, and once an infra is created for them, and this will become an advertisement place for the other, means ki these way the other revenue streams will be coming, which will share. So it's very important to know that ki what the data we are asking to be shared. It's an aggregate. Public transit is all about aggregation of the data. So
I'll only leave you with saying there is two discussions. Of course, the DPDP is mostly to do with private and personal data. There is a large body of discussion that is happening on non-personal data. You should look at Chris Gopal Krishnan committee report. There's a huge policy and debate on that.
So I'm sorry, that was last question. We have run way over our time. But this last thing, DPI or the shared infrastructure doesn't mean everything is free. People will give you data because of the value offering they get in return of data. We just need to construct those value offering. For government, it's a default value offering that they need the public good.
Sorry for this, because the next session team is giving me looks, so I have to.
Give him, not me.
Okay, please Rajit, if you could come, a small token of this thing.